It's 1997, and America is in the middle of the second term of the Clinton years. Many significant films were also released during this time, such as Good Will Hunting, LA Confidential, The Fifth Element, Princess Mononoke, and Titanic. And much like his media cousin, gaming in general also had a fantastic run this year, with the releases of Diddy Kong Racing, GoldenEye 007, Star Fox 64, Tomb Raider 2, Everybody's Golf, Gran Turismo, Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, and Fallout. Needless to say, fighting games also benefited from the likes of Bloody Roar, Darkstalkers 3, The King of Fighters 97, Rival Schools, Soul Blade, Tekken, and Street Fighter 3. This year of media was a good time had by all. But that's just when the game was released. Our story with today's game takes place in 1998, during a birthday that will introduce us to our favorite fighting game series in general. Well, was. Thanks, NRS. This is Team Crossbody, and this is Mortal Kombat 4's Run Back. Mortal Kombat 4 is the 1997 sequel to Mortal Kombat Trilogy. Developed and published by Midway Games, it's the first in the series to use 3D graphics, officially retiring a digitized look, and it's also the last MK game to have an arcade release, with home ports coming out in 1998 for the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, Windows, and the Game Boy Color. The less said about that port, the better. Before we talk about the development of MK4, let's talk about Midway, the company. Founded in 1958, the company began life as Midway Manufacturing, and it stood as one of the earliest American video game developers. Mostly sticking to the arcade market, where they published some of the most successful games like Space Invaders and Ms. Pac-Man. They also made some household names like NBA Jam, Rampage, and Spy Hunter. Needless to say, if you were in the States, it was hard to find an arcade game with Midway's name not on the cover. The company has many other games released, but I'll get to the point. In 1991, programmer Ed Boon and artist John Tobias were tasked by Midway Games to develop a fighting game within a year, intended to serve as a competitor to Capcom's massive hit Street Fighter 2. They envisioned the game being very similar to Data East's Karate Champ, but featuring digitized characters, and the data they shared from the start. Mortal Kombat began life as a ninja-themed fighting game that was ultimately rejected by Midway higher-ups. The company instead pitching the game based on 1992's Universal Soldier, starring a digitized version of Jean-Claude Van Damme. You know, Jean-Claude Van Damme from Streets.
Are you men enough to fight with me?
Anyone who opposes me will be destroyed.
Colonel, you can't!
Oh yes, I can. Just take the hostages out. If I'm not topside in 15 minutes, evacuate without me. Both of you. That's an order.
But when those plans fell through, they returned to their original concept, and 10 months later, a bouncing baby Mortal Kombat was born. A massively successful bouncing baby Mortal Kombat. So successful that Mortal Kombat would come to define the company and become the crown jewel in the company's home console strategy, with MK releasing on home systems the following year to even more praise. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, however, due to the graphic nature of the game and the increased number of hyper-violent video games that popped up between 92 and 93, shocking parents and I guess anyone who walked past an arcade cabinet or a home console. This sparked the 1993 US Senate hearing on video games, fearing the corruption of society because V-games began to put more human-like figures of them, such as Mortal Kombat,
out with a 64-bit system in the future. But the point of that is that graphics are going to become much better. And my sense is that unless we can get everybody in this business, not just the video game companies, but the retailers and the government, involved in putting a stop to the kind of things that you're seeing in Night Trap, we're really deceiving ourselves that we're going to keep this kind of violence out of the hands of children.
These hearings resulted in the entertainment software industry being given a year to work out some type of rating system, or the government would step in and make their own. This eventually gave birth to the ESRB, or the Entertainment Software Rating Board, a system that requires all video games to be rated and for these ratings to be printed on the game's packaging. All that aside, the good times kept rolling on with 1993's MK2 and 1995's MK3 and UMK3, as well as 1996's MK Trilogy, which lead us to today's focus, Mortal Kombat 4. During development, the team faced difficulties with the new 3D graphics as they had no experience with making them, but they did intend on having similar mechanics to previous entries from the beginning. I guess to avoid any gameplay slip-ups made by 1997 War Gods, Midway's first attempt at a 3D fighter. While in its advertisement cycle, Midway took the game in the themed Bosch truck to several arcades around America to hype the game's release, where many people in these areas got to play an incomplete version of the game that featured many bugs and a small number of playable characters that spurted few or no special moves at all. While out on this road tour, Mortal Kombat 4 went through several revisions that fixed bugs, changed and added characters, completed movesets, and added additional fatalities to all the roster members. I've never got to experience this tour due to me being a kid at the time. But looking at old interviews and whatnot, I've grown to discover my favorite version of Sonya Blade.
A game called Mortal Kombat Special Forces, which stars Sonya.
Hi. Hi.
The final version of MK4 that appeared in arcades officially was Revision 3, which was the version that was eventually ported to every home console. The general opinion of MK4 as a whole that I could gather was that while the graphics are good, the gameplay was solid but largely uninspired, with the worst version clearly being the GBC port. No, I'm not going to subject you people to any more of that. Although not the focus of our video and getting a little off topic, there's a couple more things I want to cover before finishing this section. An enhanced version of Mortal Kombat 4 was released only for the Dreamcast in 1999 called Mortal Kombat Gold, which added additional characters, stages, and I'm sure some rebalancing. I never got to play the game myself, but from what I can see of the game, it looks super unbalanced with its new characters breaking it. Reviews reflected this, with the critical response being a resounding meh, touting the game's worst graphics and game-breaking bugs. A year before MK4's release, a one-season, 13-episode cartoon based on the series was made called Mortal Kombat: Defenders of the Realm. The series followed a group of combatants assembled by Raiden to defend Earthrealm from various invaders who entered through portals from other dimensions. The series served as something of a mismatch of an alternate sequel to the first MK film and the events of UMK3. And while not having anything to do with MK4's story, it does have the debut of Quan Chi, so that's new. While the show is clearly not very good, personally, I can't say that I hate it, but I get why the show got negative reviews and was ultimately cancelled. They took MK and tried to turn it into G.I. Joe, with no one ever really dying and teaching life lessons by the end of each episode. That's like trying to turn Doom into a Saturday morning cartoon show for kids. Although I do believe an MK series in this fashion could absolutely work. Maybe one day. 2 months after MK4's launch, the absolute worst fighting game movie was made, 1997's Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Tell me, did you make Raiden beg for his life before destroying him?
Raiden is of no concern to us.
You let him live?
He could not be stopped.
I have no use for excuses.
While it's light years from the original movie in terms of giving a damn, I must admit that it's dumb. Like, really dumb. So dumb that it falls into a certain charm. But it's bad. Let's not get that twisted. Another short-lived series was 1998's Mortal Kombat Conquest, which was one of the first live-action shows based on a video game, if you count the Super Mario Bros. Super Show segments. The series had one season consisting of 22 episodes and served as a prequel to the games. Following the Great Kung Lao after his first win in the Mortal Kombat tournament, he is now tasked with training the next generation of warriors who would defend Earthrealm and presumably follow him into the next tournament. The show was very messy with the story, but it showed little flashes of potential for what the story could be from time to time. It was apparently canned due to ballooning production costs because even with its flaws, the show was popular. Quan Chi was hands down one of the best things about the show.
My 3 skilled assassins.
Mika was hurt.
Mika is dead! You all are.
That doesn't mean I can't feel pain in this body.
Maybe I'll change your body and show you real pain.
Sorry about the detour. I don't know another chance we would get to talk about these kind of things. And I would like to talk about all these things individually, YouTube permitting. But I think we've covered enough. It's time to get into the game itself with the presentation. I don't know how to feel about the graphics of MK4. While I can't say they're bad, on the other hand, I don't just want to praise them or come across as biased. This is the PlayStation version of the game, and I can tell you for free that the Nintendo 64 version looks a lot better. Of course, the arcade version looks the best, but we wanted to stick to the home ports because that's what would have been available to us at the time. We got this game initially for the N64, but we never got to play the Sony Pony edition, so we thought it'd be neat to base the video around this instead. And if we're talking about the PlayStation version, then the looks on hand aren't very impressive. But MK4 exports some of our favorite versions of these characters, including Raiden, Liu Kang, Quan Chi, Shinnok, and even the last minute Kano, Katana, and new substitutes, Jarrett, Rico, and Tanya, who don't look too bad. Now, of course, we had to agree on the coolest looking character in the game, and for some reason that's Sonya Blade. I personally don't know why or what it is about the costume that we like so much, but I think it's even better than her UMK3 outfit, and I love that look for her. Anyway, a major perk of owning the PS1 port of MK4 was getting to see the arcade engines in full FNV. And while you can see the visible seams and joints of these models, they're all still good looking and do the job. The N64 owners got to see these scenes in the dramatization form with the actual character models themselves, which was still pretty faithful. Stages in MK4 are super diverse, with most stages having some type of hook or set piece, like the height phase stage known as Elder God, the living trees in the, living forest, the thunder and lightning of the wind stage, the giant fan of the prison, and the completely sick looking reptiles lair. There are some bland ones, like the well and Shaolin Temple, but most arenas look great and have a good amount of detail on them. MK4, for all of its faults, has a really cool aesthetic, and the soundtrack composed by Dan Forden has to be one of our favorites in the series. This was one of the more darker entries, and the music reflects that with an ominous tone to almost all of the music, backed by some really aggressive and rhythmic percussions, and some tracks that I can only describe as spooky synth, almost as if you're a part of some far-off ancient hidden away death tournament, which I guess is what Mortal Kombat is in a nutshell. Although the Mortal Kombat tournament itself isn't even the focus of the game's narrative. The soundtrack is highly atmospheric, and you can't mistake this music for anything else. And not that fake atmosphere that the current games are providing with their boring, blockbuster, trailer-esque music since MK9. But that's a rant for another day. Here are some samples of the OST so you can get a feel of what we're talking about. As if almost designed to undercut everything I just said about the dark and moody atmosphere of the music, are the completely cartoony combat with the K battle cries. These are the stuff of legend and are very funny, but I think MK works best when it can be dark and serious while still having some fun. Here's a couple of these awesome sound bites.
Check it out! Can I take your order? You are a settle!
over there!
I'm fucking big time!
Get this out!
This strange combination of extremely aggressive, almost sinister music and odd out-of-place noises did a number to our small baby brains, because I vividly remember us being too afraid to even turn on this game, and instead wanted to go play GoldenEye to shoot some equally sinister-looking mud people instead. While not the best in the series, MK4's music is what I consider quintessential Mortal Kombat. Especially that hidden track, Thought Lost Media, that was unearthed just now.
Excellent. Sonya. Round 1. Fight!
Check it out! Check it out! Check it out!
Oh, baby.
Check it out! Check it out! Check it out!
Outstanding.
The story of MK4 centers around the release of the fallen elder god Shinnok, with the aid of the sorcerer Quan Chi, after his 1,000-year banishment to the Netherrealm by Raiden and the remaining elder gods after a war that spanned hundreds of years. Shinnok seeks vengeance against the gods for his imprisonment, and in order to put a stop to Shinnok once and for all, Raiden turns to the aid of Earthrealm heroes who all save the realms from the threat of Shao Kahn. Much like the story of MK3, the tournament itself is not the main focus here, instead zeroing in on a big bad who is taking the fight beyond the ring, with Shinnok himself being a much bigger threat than the previous villain, the powerful but highly intelligent Shao Kahn. Don't listen to interest. Unlike his fellow boss Khan, Shinnok doesn't really put up much of a fight during his boss battle, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Mortal Kombat 4's arcade mode is the ever-reliable ladder mode. This mode has you selecting from multiple towers that are ranked from Novice, which are 7 fights total, to Master 2, which are 9 fights. You can rotate each tower ahead of time to choose what group of pre-selected combatants you'll wish to face, but despite who you go up against, the final 2 fights are always reserved for the sub-boss Prince Goro, at least in the console ports, and the man himself, Shinnok. Compared to the boss battles of MK Pass, Shinnok puts up a pretty pathetic resistance against you. It's sad, really. Shinnok has the ability to take the moves of any of the roster members, similarly to Shang Tsung, but his refusal to do so just nukes any form of difficulty that could have been had. Anyway, Pope Hat here doesn't have any special moves of his own, so he'll chase you around the arena, trying to attack you with a simple high punch, high kick, back low kick string, with the occasional bone breaker and weapon draw sprinkled in, until you're done watching him struggle, and decide to explode his face, sending him screaming and plummeting back down to his forever home, the Netherrealm.
And there you go. You successfully protected reality itself from the fallen elder god Shinnok. From here, you are treated to your character's endings, and man, these endings are the living definition of mixed bag. So we'll only show you 3 endings. 1 stupid, 1 confusing, and 1 good. And no, it won't be the Sonya Jackson Jared trilogy live from Idiot Cliff. It's been done to death. I've got these endings from the YouTube channel Life and Death Live, in case you're wondering. This ending sparked a long-running controversy among the MK community that Rico was in some way Shao Kahn. And while there was plans for this to be true on some level, it never came to be. There was very little thought put into this ending, and it was largely meant to be a joke, but as it stands, it is, and always will be, very confusing.
By defeating you, Sub-Zero, I have avenged the death of my family and clan. Now my soul can finally rest.
Your soul will never rest, Scorpion. The Lin Kuei may have been responsible for your murder, but your family's true killer still remains free.
If you are not the murderer, then who is?
I am the one you seek. To defeat my nemesis Sub-Zero, I needed the power of a Spectre. You've done my bidding well, Scorpion, but now I must return you to the Netherrealm. Never!
This one starts off fine enough, but falls apart when Quan shows his stupid pinhead-like face. Why in the hell would you reveal your true involvement to Scorpion? If you had kept your mouth shut, you might have had a powerful ally. And why didn't Quan have a backup plan just in case someone rushed him during this long startup? And that little oh shit shimmy he does during Scorpion's glory charge only adds to the stupidity. And the icing on the cake is this overly dramatic Darth Vader-esque no. Dude, don't you live here? Why are you geeking out? And besides, you got out the first time, do it again. Or if Shinnok still around, ask him. You got him out the first time. I'm sure he's more than willing to do you a solid. Calm down.
For millions of years, I suffered in the bowels of the Netherrealm. You, Thunder God, are responsible for my suffering. Now the piteous mortals of Earth will pay for my grievance.
You turned against your fellow Elder Gods. You betrayed your title. You deserve much worse.
But it's too late, Raiden. I win! With the Elder Gods out of the way, I will take my rightful place as ruler of all eternity. I can already feel the power surging from within. You're mad! Farewell, Thunder God.
You know, this ending is solid, and now it might be my favorite ending in the game now that I'm thinking about it. Shinnok is just gassing himself up to Raiden, the presumed last warrior on the side of good. It's a harmless ending for how silly the voice acting is, but I do think it gets its point across. As we said before, a major issue with MK4 is that it's uninspired, with gameplay feeling very similar to the previous MK3. Hell, even the menus are the same. MK4 has a couple of new additions, like bone breakers, weapons, throwable objects, and maximum damage, and I guess side steps? But that barely plays a factor into the gameplay as a whole. Despite being a 3D fighter, the actual 3D space matters very little in fights. It's mostly used to dodge projectiles or throwable objects while running in for a punish if close enough. Since those can be blocked, you'd rather just do that anyway. Other than trying to keep your back away from the wall, sidestepping can be more useful if your character gets stuck at a certain point in the map and are unable to leave it, which does happen every now and then. Other than that, this game is primarily played in 2D or 2D.5. This game is rather confusing to place in terms of error. While it does share classic MK gameplay, the extra dimension, though limited, cannot be ignored since regardless of how limited it is, it exists. So the question is Mortal Kombat 4 a classic or a 3D era game? And the answer to that is how you look at it. There's camps on both sides. Personally, I'll put it in the 3D era, if not for the gameplay, because the game is literally 3D and they all will be going forward. MK4 uses a 6-button layout: low punch, high punch, low kick, high kick, run, and block, with the newly added side stat being executable by double tapping the run button. When LP is used close to the opponent, they will be thrown. The same goes for LK. Doing this will allow your character to do a special throw called a bone breaker attack, which is essentially another throw. Both type of throws can't be broken, which is rather stupid seeing how fast they come out, and both throws can be implemented in different ways during combat, especially the bone breaker attacks, but more on that later. When close to your opponent, you can initiate a chain combo. These types of combos are common in most fighting games. They can be compared to strings like in Tekken or Virtua Fighter, Gatlins like in Guilty Gear, or Magic Series like in MVC or most anime fighters. Close HP and HK can be cancelled into any special move or run. Ending a chain in the uppercut will put a character into a juggle state, allowing you to follow up in that way. Normals are shared among the cast, so picking up a character is rather simple. The only thing you should focus on when labbing a particular character is the special moves and the throws they have. And if you're lucky, your character can be blessed with one of the 3 Godbreaker throws, that are so powerful, so broken, that they supersede a character's moveset and can make someone viable by just having them.
MK3 had an issue with damage, combos, and infinites, so Midway took notice and they implemented the max damage system for MK4, which behaves more like a damage cap for combos that go over 40%. Once that damage is reached, both characters will be forced away from each other and return to neutral, so in a way it behaves like a grandfather to the breaker system for later games. Much like most things lazily implemented into a system to band-aid problems with the previous game, max damage can be worked around. There are certain setups some characters can use to take advantage and actually game the system. Scorpion, for example, can use a spare in certain combos to activate the max damage knockback, which will blast him back and will still drag the dazed opponent towards you, leaving enough time for him to recover and connect with a follow-up attack for a free combo after hitting the damage cap. The second combo isn't optimized, but I'm sure this can lead to a 2-touch kill, or at least 2.5. Another example is Fujin while using a club weapon. He can bypass the damage cap as well, albeit in the corner. What I did here was land a dive kick and follow up with a wind lift. After slamming them back down with the follow-up, hit them with the weapon against the screen and run up and do it again. This should activate max damage at a chunky 52%. Once again, the opponent will not be knocked away due to already being in a capture state, allowing Fujin to recover before Jack can. After that, land another wind lift and slam and finish with however way you like. With this netting 51%. I'm sure blocking the weapon throw is an option, but this is just an example. While jumping, you have two ways to transition into combos. High punch provides you with a traveling jumping attack. Low kick and high kick can also give you a jump-in combo starter, but that can only be done from a neutral jump. This game has an interesting glitch in which you can perform a neutral jump kick seconds before leaving the ground. I'm not sure on how this works completely, but my theory is that if you can manage to hit the kick buttons before entering pre-jump frames. Does this game have pre-jump frames? Anyway, hitting it will cause your character to jump kick as soon as they leave the ground. It's hard, like really hard to do. You have to hit the jump and up buttons at almost the exact same time. I found that hitting both low kick and high kick while tapping up made the glitch appear more consistently for me. And from what I can see from what little high level gameplay there is, that it might be good for pressuring the opponent as well, but it might not be worth it because it's so difficult to do and you'll just be jumping for no reason if mistimed. We've mentioned this attack before. And Bonebreaker might be the featured attack of the game outside of weapons. When low kick is used close to someone, the character will be thrown in a more violent way. This could range from cool throws like Reptile, Raiden, or Fujin, to goofy ones like Quan Chi, Sub-Zero, or Scorpion. Bonebreakers and low punch throws are similar in use, but Bonebreaker deals much more damage and puts you in much better positions. So I don't see what's the point of using normal throws. Throws in general work weird in this game. Again, they can't be teched like in most games, but more importantly, throws can OTG, or off the ground. Both throws can be used in this way, with low punch throwing the opponents away, but Bonebreakers restand, and some can be looped and even used for a free hit. In general, Bonebreakers are great on everyone, but not all of them are created equally. At this time, I would like to present the fabled Bonebreakers. These are, in our opinion, the most broken attacks of the game. We dub these the Godbreaker attacks, which are the Kadama Kick, the Underpit Assault, and the Really Shouldn't Hurt attack.
Finish him!
Most of these Bonebreaker throws are just big damage and that's it. Some even leave characters negative, like Sonya's Neckbreaker, but these throws, only usable by Jarrett, Jax, Rico, and Scorpion, are so plus that they can be looped until max damage or use to get a free hit to start a chain combo. Now this doesn't make them the best characters in the game, although Rico might be considered, a contender, as characters with good twos will always be the better option. But what do we know? We don't play this game competitively. When shooting fireballs, breaking bones, and chain comboing opponents isn't just enough, characters have convenient weapons stashed away in their pockets. No, seriously, they pull them from out their pockets. Each character has their own weapon, giving you more tools to play with, despite weapons behaving the same way because they're grouped in certain types, like a sword giving you this and a club giving you that. However, certain weapons are wholly unique, like Tanya's boomerang or Fujin's laser crossbow. The only weapon with a completely unique attack is Sub-Zero's Frost Club that has a freezing threats attack that comes out relatively fast. Midway must have thought these weapons were seriously overpowered because if you're touched just once while holding one, the character will drop them. This hurts the weapons because some are actually useful, but this decision overall ruins consistency, making them harder to use. If digging in your pockets to pull out a weapon proves too risky though, inputting the command for said weapon during a grounded combo will instantly bring them out, either finishing the combo or giving you a pop-up for a jump. And once dropped, any character can pick up any weapon by standing over it and pressing the crouch button while hitting run. Some characters are actually better with other characters' weapons, and if you input the character's weapon command again while holding them, they'll throw them. Speaking of picking things up and throwing them, on some stages there are throwable objects. To throw something, you just do the same thing you do with the weapon. Stand over them, crouch, and press run. If done right or near the object, they will throw them. These can be looked at as the interactables from later Midway/NRS games. Unlike those games, however, these only boil down to tossing objects at people, no more, no less. Not only that, like 3 stages have them, so not only are they too situational, they're also rare to boot. Hey, at least this makes sidestepping slightly more viable. Yet, somehow with all these ill thought out and half-baked ideas, MK4 is surprisingly fun to play. It doesn't hold up, not at all to the other games in the franchise, but it has a weirdness to it, it's just the right amount of crazy shit combined with all these poor attempts to keep the game balanced and fresh, and somehow it all works. And up till now, it still has a semi-unique way of playing. You can literally see the ideas of later games in MK4. The transition, though limited, into 3D, the weapons for each character, and the interactables. Each of these concepts were brought back and refined in future games, making MK4 very important in our opinion. And there's no telling where the franchise would be gameplay-wise if this didn't exist.
Finish him!
Mortal Kombat 4 is an awkward game more than a terrible one, being more held back by the context behind things than anything else. It was the last arcade game for the series when arcades were a dying market, with those versions not even having the real final/sub boss until the home ports. Special moves aside, the cast largely plays the same. While having a very strong story, it was sandwiched between MK Mythologies and Special Forces, which are considered 2 of the worst games in the series. And worst of all, Sega and Namco released heavy hitters in the 3D fighting space with Virtua Fighter 3, Tekken 3, and Soul Calibur, some of the strongest in early 3D gaming. MK4's fence-sitting nature didn't help it stand out much because it wasn't 3D enough to hang with the big boys, but just 2D enough to suffer from the declining interest in that dimension of fighting games during that time. Oh, and not having a solid port was also a major problem. MK4 was destined to be the scapegoat for Midway's transition from pure 2D to pure 3D, and while it could have been better, clearly, a game in this fashion was inevitable. With all that being said, I'm sure us and a lot of other people like MK4 just the way it is. Bad endings and awkward gameplay and all. I'm not ashamed to say that this opinion is completely nostalgia driven, but I was pleasantly surprised with how much the gameplay, although just a more simplified version of UMK3, is still very much solid and playable. I don't recommend Mortal Kombat 4. It doesn't hold up when you can just play the superior MK trilogy, but there's still a lot of fun to be had, even with all of its faults. See you next time on The Runback.